Wasabi guys, welcome back to another how to build around this commander video. Before I get into it though, first I would like to remind you, if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. We're at 31,000, I want to thank the community, I want to thank you guys for helping me get there. This time we're going to be talking about Chishiro the Shattered Blade. This commander option from the green and red Upgrades Unleashed deck is all about the modified keyword and benefiting from how you make your creatures modified. Chishiro is a 4-mana legendary snake samurai of 4/4 with 2 abilities. Whenever an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. And at the beginning of your end step, you put a +1/+1 counter on each modified creature you control. A creature is considered modified if it has any of the following: an equipment, an aura, or a counter on it. This commander is pretty straightforward. We want to focus on combat, and there are only really 4 major categories here. The first one, we want to focus on auras. We do have access to some good auras, but I'm not going to lie to you, they are rather limited compared to the power that we gain from equipments and counters. In order to really benefit from an enchantment theme, we're probably going to have to go all in, which is not something we want to do necessarily with this commander. So when we do play auras, it's with a focus on combat. And then we have equipments. This is where the bulk of the deck is probably going to be, or at least a decent portion. A lot of strong equipments and a lot of new additions with equipment creatures. And then we of course have our counters focus. It's not just +1/+1 counters, although that's the easiest way of getting counters. Don't forget we have ability counters like indestructible counters and hexproof counters. And the last one, of course, we want to benefit from modified because this set is the introduction to modified. Any type of payoff there is for a creature being modified, we want to benefit from it. Now, looking at the reprinted auras that come with the Upgrades Unleashed commander deck, we don't get a ton, but we do have a couple that are worth talking about here: Snake Umbra and Bear Umbra. The totem armor keyword is pretty cool. It acts as a form of protection. Whenever a creature would be destroyed, you just destroy this totem armor instead. Snake Umbra gives the creature +1/+1, and whenever it deals damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. Bear Umbra is where it's at though. This was a great reprint for this deck. Creature gets +2/+2, and whenever it attacks, you untap all lands you control, pretty much giving you the rest of your turn post-combat to do whatever you want. Very strong ability whenever you get to just untap your mana and allow yourself to continue playing spells. We do have some new additions that come out specifically with this precon. Unquenchable Fury is brilliant, and I think it's going to be an all-star. It gives the enchanted creature, whenever this creature attacks, it deals X damage to defending player, where X is the number of cards in their hand. I think that's a great ability alone, but this second ability here, when Unquenchable Fury is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you return it to your hand, means that you're going to be able to play it again, even if you lose it, and you'll also be able to trigger Chishiro again. We have some auras that are like that. I really encourage you to play the auras that return to your hand, because our commander does give us more tokens whenever we have one enter. And one with Kami is a new one. It's not necessarily important for this deck, but it does synergize with modified if you were looking for synergies. Any card that mentions the modified wording, it has flash, which is great in response to removal, because whenever the enchanted creature or another modified creature you control dies, you create X 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens, where X is that creature's power. Now, as for cards that I would personally add to this strategy, I'm not looking for anything explosive necessarily. I'm looking for long-term value. I'm looking also for recovery. It's no secret that whenever you play aura and equipment decks, it's very difficult to recover late in the game. Cards like Rancor and Aspect of Mongoose don't really overpower your opponents, but it's just enough. It's what you need out of 2 pretty cheap auras. Rancor just keeps coming back to your hand when it goes to the graveyard. Same thing with Aspect of Mongoose. Aspect of Mongoose, I know some people won't want Shroud or Shroud adjacent, but it's not as bad as it might seem, because our commander does put +1/+1 counters on each creature. That trigger does not target specific creatures, and it's great protection. If you want to focus more on combat and +1/+1 counter production, Hydra's Growth is pretty ridiculous. It enters the battlefield and puts a +1/+1 counter on the enchanted creature, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you just double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. So you're going to keep getting +1/+1 counters because of our commander, and you're going to keep doubling them because of Hydra's Growth. Runes of the Deus is a bit expensive for an aura. I know a lot of people don't want to spend this much, but if your goal is commander damage, I can't think of a better aura. +1/+1 for each of its colors, so really +2/+2, double strike and trample. If it's red, it gains double strike. If it's green, it gains trample. In each one of our end steps, Chishiro is going to keep putting a +1/+1 counter on itself, making it very easy to knock out opponents. Now we move on to equipments. I think equipments are going to be a lot stronger for this strategy. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult to get rid of them. Once you get rid of the creature, the equipment doesn't necessarily go away. In the ones that come with the precon, we're looking at Swiftfoot Boots, which has always been great protection. Also offers haste. Blackblade Reforged, if you're looking for commander damage, this is a pretty decent one, although not always great if you're not focused on commander damage. Fire Shrieker Double Strike is one of the best keywords, so sometimes it's worth constantly paying that 2 equip cost to put it on another creature. Sword of Vengeance gives great keywords and +2 power. We also have the card Mage Slayer, which is a little bit more unique and specific to these colors. Whenever the equipped creature attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So if Chishiro is a 8 power creature, it's going to deal 8 damage to our opponent. In the new additions coming out in this specific precon, we're looking at Kumainu, Battle Armor, and Tanuki Transplanter. Both of these are equipment creatures, which means that they come into play. They are considered creatures until you decide to reconfigure them, which is just different wording for equip. They become equipments that are equipped to the creature you're equipping them to. I don't think either of these are bad equipments, but at the same time, I wouldn't fault you if you decided to cut them from the original precon deck that you're building from. I just think we have a lot of better equipments that work a lot faster. Reconfigure is a bit pricier in equip cost, so I'm just going to go over some recommendations if you decide to go more of the equipment route with this commander. Again, I do think that equipments is one of the better ways that you could build around this commander, just because auras and counters tend to go away with your creatures. Paradise Mantle, I think, is going to be an underrated option for this commander deck, because you're not really using it for combat, you're using it to make a creature modified. It's a 0 cost equipment with a 1 equip cost that makes any creature basically a mana dork. Sword of the Animist is another mana-focused card. I think even if this deck wasn't so focused on modified, and it was just about benefiting from equipments, I would say go for it 9 times out of 10. But you do get the added benefit of whenever you can make a creature modified with any equipment. Sword of the Animist is a pretty above average one. And Conqueror's Flail is another underrated equipment that pretty much prevents our opponents from playing spells during our turn. Also, thinking outside of combat, we have Shadow Spear, more about controlling what our opponents are able to do. Taking away Hexproof and Indestructible, especially Indestructible, if we are going to combat, is pretty good. Trample and Lifelink, +1/+1, one of the best equipments to come out within the past couple years. Lightning Greaves, of course, the equip cost is the easiest to make any creature modified, and I know Shroud, again, you're going to run into those problems. Anytime you're playing an aura equipment deck, Shroud does make it a bit more difficult, but the upside in making a creature modified for 0 mana cannot be ignored. Darksteel Plate is another above average equipment, more of a defensive one, although Indestructible does make it easier to swing in. Now we talk about the big time synergies. These are the ones that I think you probably should consider playing above all of the other ones, just because it actually is focusing on what our commander is doing, what our commander can offer us. Stoneforge Masterwork is going to benefit your tokens since you're able to get a ton of them out there. You're playing a lot of equipments, you're playing a lot of auras, you'll get those 2/2 spirits with Menace, and since they're all spirits, Stoneforge Masterwork is going to give the equipped creature +1/+1 for each other creature we control that shares a creature type with it. Varak Battlehorns is a great card if you have any creatures with Menace, but because our commander just keeps printing those 2/2s with Menace, it means we always have something out there that can attack pretty much unblocked. Equipped creature has trample and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, which pretty much means with Menace it's unblockable. And for only 1 mana to do that, I think this is a must-have. Helm of the Host doesn't do anything super explosive with our commander in Chishiro. However, I think if you're able to get multiple Shishiros, it just means that each time you play an aura or an equipment, you have it come into play, you'll be getting more tokens, and at the beginning of your end step, you're getting multiple triggers, you're getting multiple +1/+1 counters on all of your modified creatures. Never really hurts to accelerate. This is acceleration to the max. Other equipments that are fun, we have another new addition here in Lizard Blades. If we're just talking about new cards from the main set, Lizard Blades is probably one of the best ones. Double strike creature that reconfigures to another creature and gives it double strike for only 2 mana. Compared to the equipment creatures that come with the precon itself, I certainly would rather play Lizard Blades. And if you want to lean into the equipment strategy, go all in, we have a ton of swords that benefit that. Sword of Feast and Famine has always been one of the better ones. If you love Bear Umbra, you kind of have the same thing here. Sword of Truth and Justice, however, I think is perfect for this deck, since we're putting counters on all of our creatures that are modified. This puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control and then proliferates. So all the swords give protection from 2 colors. These, I think, have some of the better abilities. Now we move on to the counter focus. We're going to talk about the cards that come with the precon. First, we have Grumgully the Generous, Rishkar, Pima Renegade, and Champion of Lamholt. Grumgully has always been a favorite of mine in any kind of strategy where you need counters on your creatures for some ability. Now in this case, we need counters on our creatures so that they're considered modified. I really like Grumgully, and I think you should probably keep it in the deck if you are looking to build straight out of the precon. I feel the same exact way about Rishkar and Champion of Lamholt, all about getting more +1/+1 counters. Rishkar gives you mana for it, and Champion of Lamholt just pretty much means you can swing in uncontested with all of your creatures at some point in the game. Rhythm of the Wild is another one that you should probably keep in your deck, since it's going to serve a similar purpose to Grumgully, but it's going to make your creatures uncounterable, and your non-token creatures have Riot, so they can enter with either a +1/+1 counter or haste. You're probably going to choose the +1/+1 counter unless you have a creature that needs to attack. Some newer cards that we have for a counter strategy, we have Silk Guard, which acts as an instant speed protection spell. You pay X and a green to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures you control, or as equipments and modified creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn. So you don't even need to put anything into X. If all of your creatures are already modified, for 1 green mana they gain hexproof until end of turn. I think that is strong. Concord of the Kami isn't anchored to the +1/+1 counter theme, but the first mode that we choose at the beginning of our end step puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature with a counter on it. We could also choose one of the other 2 modes. We draw a card if we control an enchanted creature, or we create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token if we control an equipped creature. Very flexible, very centered around modified. Now, while it doesn't come in the precon deck itself, Miyajin of Towering Might does synergize with decks that are looking for counters. It does come into play with an indestructible counter, which automatically makes it a modified creature, but you can remove the indestructible counter to distribute 8 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, and they gain trample until end of turn. If I'm looking to improve upon the counter strategy, I'm looking at cards like Bloodspore Thrynax and Renata Called to the Hunt. Especially Bloodspore Thrynax, because this ability is going to be crazy. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Bloodspore Thrynax. So all you do, you sacrifice some of those tokens we get from our commander to have it come into play with at least 1 counter on it. Chishiro's going to keep putting counters on it because it's a modified creature. Your other creatures are then going to come into play with more +1/+1 counters because of that, and if it's left alone, it's probably just going to win you the game. We have some other fun synergies with counters. We have Scurry Oak. This has a ton of combo potential, and I think Evolve is going to work out pretty well with this commander. Since it'll pretty much always be considered modified, you can keep putting +1/+1 counters on it. Each time you do that, you're going to get a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, making it easy to keep a board presence. Spike Weaver is great if you're looking to lock out opponents, keep them from their combat. You get to replenish the +1/+1 counters you're removing from it to Fog. And Slippery Bogbonder is a favorite of mine, I think. If you're looking for the counter synergy, you're looking to add to that, this needs to be towards the top of your search. Has Flash and Hexproof, and it gives a Hexproof counter to another target creature. And beyond that, we just have a ton of powerful +1/+1 counter synergies. The Ozolith, for the mana that you're spending, is one of the best cards ever. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it at all, not just +1/+1 counters, you put those counters on the Ozolith. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if it has any counters on it, you may move those counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. Walking Ballista is an option if you're looking for more of a win con. Don't know how I feel about it in this deck. You would probably have to lean into the +1/+1 counter synergy, maybe make that more of the focus. Verdurous Gearhulk I think is a great option if you are looking to make as many creatures modified as possible. That way we get more counters off of our commander. The last focus would be cards that synergize with modified. We're looking at the new set in particular, and in this commander precon deck we have Kosei, Penitent Warlord. This 3-mana green ogre samurai says as long as Kosei Penitent Warlord is enchanted, equipped, and has a counter on it, so you need all 3. He has whenever he deals combat damage to an opponent, you draw that many cards and he deals that much damage to each other opponent. So definitely worth it if you are looking to benefit from all 3 and not just 1 or 2. Kamiya Celebration is all about modified creatures. Whenever one of them we control attacks, we exile the top card of our library. We get to play that card this turn, and whenever we cast a spell from exile, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control. And lastly, we have Aki Battle Squad. Whenever one or more modified creatures we control attack, we untap all modified creatures we control. After this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase, and that only triggers once each turn. So that's going to do it for how to build around Chishiro the Shattered Blade. As I said before, the best way to build around it would probably be focusing on equipments and +1/+1 counters or counter synergies in general. There's just a lot more to choose from, and there are a lot better ways of benefiting from that compared to auras, and especially with equipments. They have a lasting impact on the game, and you just get better abilities compared to anything else. Thank you all so much for watching. Commander Void here. I will see you all next time.